Every rotational athlete struggles with movement faults, but most coaches only focus on the symptom, not the actual pattern driving it. After more than 2 decades working with MLB pitchers, PGA Tour golfers, and rotational athletes across multiple sports, I've learned that almost every issue falls into one of 4 primary patterns. Today, I'm breaking down those patterns so you can identify and fix the real problem, not the surface level symptom. Early in my career, it looked like rotational athletes had 100 different issues. The more biomechanical analysis I did, the more I realized that almost every fault, every compensation, and every inconsistency traced back to one of 4 root patterns. I saw the same thing in MLB pitchers, PGA Tour players, tennis athletes, and softball hitters. Different sports, different athletes, same underlying movement faults. Once you understand these patterns, you can diagnose faster, coach cleaner, and eliminate wasted time. The first pattern is instability through the lumbopelvic hip complex, the LPHC. This is the athlete's center of control. And when it's unstable, the entire chain becomes unstable. Here's how it shows up. Early extension, excessive lumbar rotation, loss of posture, excessive side bend, a wobbly transition in hitters and golfers, and inconsistent release timing in pitchers. Why does this matter? Because if the center of the body isn't stable, nothing built around it will be stable. LPHC instability disrupts force transfer, creates energy leaks, and forces the athlete to compensate with the spine, shoulders, and hips. The second pattern is limited hip mobility, specifically internal rotation, external rotation, flexion, or extension. Rotational athletes run out of hip quickly. When the hip stops rotating, the body looks for rotation somewhere else. Here's how it shows up. The pelvis stops rotating because the hips reach their mobility limit. The athlete shifts laterally instead of rotating. The lumbar spine rotates excessively to make up for lost hip rotation. The lead hip can't internally rotate during deceleration, and pitchers land open or closed because they're protecting a mobility deficit, not reacting to a cue. This matters because the hips must rotate freely to allow pelvis to torso separation. If the hips don't move, rotation shifts into the spine and shoulders, and that's where power decreases and injuries increase. When the hips can't rotate, the athlete will find rotation somewhere else, and that's where the injury happens. The third pattern is poor sequencing, the most common mechanical issue in rotational athletes. Sequencing is the order the segments accelerate. The lower body initiates, the pelvis accelerates first, the torso follows, the arm or implement accelerates last. When that order breaks down, the athlete struggles. Here's how it shows up. The shoulders race ahead of the hips. The pelvis stalls mid-rotation. The upper body dominates. The athlete muscles the motion instead of creating a whip, and you see high perceived effort with low output. Power is timing and strength. If timing breaks down, the athlete works harder and gets less. The fourth pattern is poor deceleration, the most overlooked fault in rotational sports. Athletes accelerate extremely well, but most of them cannot brake. The deceleration system includes the glutes, the lumbopelvic hip complex, the posterior shoulder, and the lead leg. When those tissues can't control the forces created during rotation, several things happen. The athlete loses balance on the follow-through, energy leaks out of the system, The torso slingshots forward instead of stopping cleanly, and the shoulder and elbow take overload they cannot absorb. Acceleration without deceleration is an injury waiting to happen. These patterns rarely show up alone. They tend to cluster. LPHC instability almost always creates sequencing issues. Hip mobility deficits directly lead to lumbar over-rotation and decel patterns. And mechanical issues often develop because the athlete doesn't have the physical capacity to support the motion. Here are a few real-world examples. A pitcher with limited hip internal rotation, the pelvis can't rotate, the arm races ahead, the shoulder and elbow break down. A golfer with LPHC instability creates early extension, lumbar spine absorbs rotational load, and lower back pain happens. A hitter with poor deceleration creates inconsistent contact, lower back irritation. You're never fixing one thing. You're fixing the pattern driving the symptoms. Here's how you start fixing these patterns mechanically. Improve sequencing and timing, teach clean pressure shifts, develop strong lead leg deceleration, train pattern acceleration and deceleration, not random speed. Rehearse rotational patterns slowly before going fast, and clean the movement strategy before loading it. If the pattern doesn't change, the performance won't change. Now the physical side, which is where most programs fall short. Improve LPHC stability, the foundation for all rotation. Increase hip internal and external rotation, strengthen the posterior chain, improve thoracic rotation, build posterior shoulder and cuff strength for overhead athletes, develop forearm strength for pitchers, and train eccentric braking strength to support deceleration. Mechanical fixes stick when the physical capacity supports them. Rotational athletes deal with a lot of symptoms, but almost all of those symptoms trace back to four primary patterns: LPHC instability, limited hip mobility, poor sequencing, and poor deceleration. Understand the pattern, fix the pattern, and you fix the athlete.